How does a man stand over four freshly stabbed bodies, his own nightshirt drenched in their blood, and expect the law to believe he is the victim? In the summer of 1860, William Youngman did exactly that. He claimed his own mother had gone mad, slaughtered his fiancé and his two little brothers, and that he had only killed her to save himself. With no living witnesses left inside the room, it looked like an impossible forensic deadlock. But investigators soon discovered a single, hidden document that turned a horrific family tragedy into something far more sinister, a calculated trap for profit. If you want to understand how a booming Victorian financial system accidentally put a price tag on human life, and how a simple piece of paper could drive a man to wipe out his entire household, subscribe, because in the next 8 minutes, this story reveals just how dark the pursuit of easy money can get. To understand how this nightmare unfolded, we have to look at the cramped, suffocating reality of working-class London in 1860. William Youngman was 25 years old, out of work, and living in his family's lodgings on Manor Place in Walworth. In Victorian London, privacy wasn't just a luxury. For families like the Youngmans, it didn't exist. The rooms were small, the walls were thin, and every sound carried straight through the floorboards. Into this tense, financially strained household walked Mary Streeter. She was William's fiancée, a young woman from Sussex who had traveled to the capital with a heart full of hope. The banns of marriage had already been published at St. Martin-in-the-Fields. As far as Mary and her family knew, she was there to finalize the details of a wedding that would secure her future. She had no idea that her arrival had been meticulously timed, or that her life had already been given a very specific cash value. Between 5:30 and 6 a.m. on the morning of July 31st, 1860, the suffocating quiet of the Walworth lodging house was shattered. Screams tore through the building, piercing enough to instantly rouse the neighbors. Those who rushed toward the noise were met with a scene of absolute horror on the dark landing. There stood William Youngman in his nightshirt. Spread across the floor and inside the rooms around him lay four bodies, each bearing horrific, deep stab wounds. His fiancée, Mary Streeter, lay dead. Beside her was William's mother, Elizabeth. In the adjacent beds, the Blades had also found his two young brothers, Charles and Thomas, aged just 11 and 7. The slaughter was total, swift, and completely unsparing. As the neighbors stood frozen in shock, Youngman didn't panic. Instead, he offered an explanation that was as cold as it was calculated. He looked at the officers who arrived on the scene and pointed directly at his dead mother. He claimed that she had completely lost her mind, grabbed a knife, and systematically slaughtered Mary and the two young boys. Youngman insisted that he had only intervened at the very end, wrestling with his mother and ultimately stabbing her in absolute self-defense when she turned the weapon on him. For the investigators, this created an immediate, deeply frustrating legal deadlock. In 1860, forensic science was in its infancy. There were no fingerprint databases, no DNA profiling, and no blood spatter analysts to reconstruct the exact sequence of the struggle. On paper, it was a classic case of one man's word against a room full of ghosts. Because everyone else inside the flat was dead, Youngman had crafted a defense where the only people who could call him a liar were buried under sheets. The deadlock didn't last long. When detectives searched Youngman's belongings, they found a fresh piece of corporate paperwork that blew his self-defense story apart. It was a life insurance policy from the British Prudential Assurance Company, taken out on Mary Streeter for the sum of £100. Youngman had secretly arranged it just days before she arrived in London, naming himself as the sole beneficiary. To put that in perspective, for 1860, £100 was roughly 2 to 3 years' worth of wages for a domestic servant. In the mid-Victorian era, the commercial life insurance market was booming, but it was dangerously underregulated. For a tiny premium, companies allowed ordinary people to insure the lives of others without needing to prove a legitimate financial stake in keeping them alive. The justice system was slowly waking up to a terrifying reality. The financial sector had accidentally created a system wherein a regular citizen could quietly place a profitable wager on a human being's death. This discovery shifted the entire legal understanding of the crime. Youngman hadn't set out that morning to become a mass murderer. His original plan was almost certainly a cold, singular homicide. Kill Mary, claim she was a victim of a random attack or accident, and collect the £100 payout. But the physical reality of a cramped Victorian lodging house ruined the plan. The moment Youngman launched his assault on Mary, the noise woke his mother and his little brothers. In 1860, the English justice system gave no leniency for murder. The penalty was the gallows. Youngman instantly realized that a single surviving witness meant his certain death. This triggered a frantic witness elimination panic. To protect his secret and save his own neck, he was forced into a desperate, escalating gamble, wiping out his entire family to ensure no one could ever contradict his story. When the trial opened at the Old Bailey in August 1860, the courtroom was packed with a public eager to see how the justice system would handle such a chilling defense. The prosecution knew they couldn't rely on eyewitnesses, so they turned to forensic logic and a damning timeline of the insurance policy. They presented the medical evidence, showing the jury that the wounds on Youngman's mother and brothers were inflicted with a level of precision and violence that a panicked, elderly woman simply could not have achieved in a frantic struggle. The defense tried to maintain that the mother had snapped under the pressure of the family's poverty, but the prosecution pinned Youngman down with a £100 policy. They asked the jury a simple, devastating question. Why would an unemployed footman, who could barely afford his own lodging, scramble to ensure the life of his fiancé days before her arrival? Unless he knew she wouldn't survive the visit? The financial motive bridged the gap where physical evidence was lacking. It took the jury less than 20 minutes to find William Youngman guilty. On September 4th, 1860, a crowd of nearly 30,000 people gathered outside Horsemonger Lane Jail to watch William Youngman hang. His execution was one of the last highly attended public hangings in London before the practice was moved behind prison walls. Right up until the trapdoor snapped open, Youngman maintained his innocence, stubbornly insisting that his dead mother was the true villain of the story. The Nightshirt Massacre left a deep scar on the Victorian public, not just because of the brutality of the killings, but because of what it revealed about the dark side of progress. It forced Parliament and the insurance industry to reckon with a terrifying loophole. When you allow the financial value of a death to outweigh the legal protection of a life, the system itself becomes a breeding ground for monsters. What do you think of this case? Did the prosecution do enough to prove Youngman's guilt despite having no living eyewitnesses? Let me know in the comments below, and subscribe if you want to explore more forgotten historical files where the law and human nature collide.